2 begins. Meow. There's more than a few lolcat pictures in this prezo, so that's appropriate. All right, you ready? Rolling? Cool. All right, so purpose of this talk is logs are speaking, are you listening? Subtitle could be log like you mean it. A little bit about myself. My name's Mick Douglas. I work at Binary Defense, where I'm the digital forensics practice lead. And logging is important for digital forensics. I've stopped counting the number of times where we've gone in, smoke jumped for a client or a client who said, hey, we need to be a client right now. And they say, we don't know how they got in. It was like magical. We had no idea. Crack open some log sources, and we're like, it's right there, dude, like right there. And they're like, wow, that's pretty magical. And that makes me sad, really sad. Somewhere, we as an industry have lost our way. We need to start paying attention to fundamentals. And so this talk is an attempt to combat that problem. This talk is my own talk. I'm not talking on behalf of anybody else. This is a messy talk. There's going to be some slides in here that may make you feel a little uncomfortable, especially if you're a vendor selling like big data compliance appliance type stuff, because those are not really working, right? If they were, we wouldn't be having breaches happening all the time. So, yeah, this is going to be a weird talk. I'm going to be giving some talks for SANS here. You might want to check them out. This is a very tech-heavy crowd, so I want to point this one out. If you use burp at work, you might want to check out Source Boston that's coming up. A buddy of mine, John Gorenflo, and I are making a tool that it's basically, it allows you to bridge Python scripts to burp so that you can have a very robust test framework. It's actually pretty baller. It's very, very fun. And the other thing is it's rather fast and flexible. So part 1, this is going to be the first presentation of many. Now, it might not be in person like this. It might be webinars or whatever. But I want to do a series of talks called Fun with Fundamentals. We've lost our way. We've forgotten how to do the basics. And this one is all about logging. So if you want to like stay tuned, follow me on Twitter at BetterSafetyNet, and you can see when I announce the next one and how you can listen to it. This is a weird talk. I gave a presentation, a demo presentation to some tech buddies of mine, and they said, this is too managery. Man, we need more tech stuff. And I was like, okay, interesting. Gave the same talk to some manager buddies of mine, and they're like, too techy. Blah. To which I said, yeah. Because the idea is I want folks to get pushed just a little bit out of their comfort zone, right? We've become complacent. I want you guys to be thinking, if you're very techie-oriented, start thinking a little more strategically. If you're very managery, start opening up the scary macros and packets and looking at the actual data. Folks, bottom line is that every day logs are being ignored. They're crying. And just for moments of your time, these neglected logs can get the love they so richly deserve. If you were a log, you might feel like you're this. And that's frustrating, right? A lot of people hear this and they start saying, yeah, Mick, I want to listen to the logs. I want to listen. And I say, great, that's cool. They're like, all right, I'm going to buy the huge SAN. We're going to throw all the logs at it. We're going to do all this stuff, and it's going to be great. We're going to log all the things. And I say, no, don't do that. No, that's horrible. Has anybody ever tried to log all the things? I've tried to log all the, have you tried to, how did that go? It's a lot of logs. In fact, I'll tell you what, here's what happens when you try to log all the things. You've gone on a log bender, and you get like this hangover, right? You get a sick tummy. You've got more data than you can handle. You might even be experiencing this at work. You might have a write-only SIM. It's the SIM that's so at capacity, you can't run search queries during high volume. You laugh, but I run into that. That's almost criminal when you think about what a SIM should do. So I want to tell you guys, here's some things that you can take to the bank. Be on the lookout for some buzzwords. Things to avoid are big data, machine learning, cloud, pretty much any buzzword. Start looking at it skeptically. The reason why is if these things solve the problem, I wouldn't be giving this talk, we wouldn't be having the breaches, life would be better. But I'm giving this talk, we're having the breaches, and life unfortunately isn't better. So these things can be good. They can be good, but they shouldn't be your first tool that you reach to. You got to crawl, walk, run. If you think that you can just buy an off-the-shelf big data component and have meaningful logging, you're sadly mistaken. Or you're just helping out some sales guys, quotas, I don't know. Think of it this way, you got to eat your vegetables before you can have dessert. So big data and machine learning, super fun, super sexy, and you should move to those, just not right away, hold off. So when you hear somebody starting to sell you things like machine learning, I want you to start thinking of folks like this, because they're hucksters. And I think a better way to put this is what Bruce Schneier said. If you think that if technology can solve your security problem, you don't understand the problems, and you don't understand the technology. He hit the nail on the head. We can't tech our way out of this. Well, dang, Mick, what's the fix? Unfortunately, we've got 2 4-letter words for you. Hard work. Roll up the sleeves, apply a little elbow grease, and you're going to get wonders done. Now, what I'm going to share with you the rest of this talk is some ways that you can do that so that you don't get burnout and you don't die an early death. The fundamental key to this is being targeted. Don't try to log all the things at once. Pick one log source, just one, that's going to give you high-value info with not a whole lot of effort. And I'll, in a couple slides, give you some candidate ones. You might have others that in your environment might be easier. Now what I'm going to do, this is a very techie crowd, so I don't expect it. Are there any auditors in the crowd? You sit next to some? All right, if you really want to watch them like steam pop out their ears, show them this slide. This next slide are some log sources that people think are going to be good ones to ingest. And man, it's a trail of woe. And for each one, I'll explain why. Windows event logs, right? Everything's in there. What's in Windows event logs? Every damn thing. What's the signal to noise ratio in the Windows event logs? Folks, I work as an MSSP. I do digital forensics, and I'm telling you not to go to the Windows event logs. Yeah, they're that bad. Now, eventually you need to ingest them and use them. Please do. But they make a horrible starting off point. You're never going to finish this project. Desktop logs, any log source from a desktop machine is a fool's errand because these machines pop in and out of existence all the time. The only exception is antivirus. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Antivirus has a near and dear spot to my heart, and we'll cover that the next slide. Firewall logs, and more importantly, edge network devices. At least 4 times a week, I have to talk a client off the ledge of, hey, we got all this stuff, and we're going to log at the firewall and see the alerts that come in from the internet. Why? Like, are you for real, dude? Like, you do know what happens when you connect an IDS to the internet. And they're like, no, what? I'm like, all the hate that is the open sewer of the internet flows into that IDS. Your graphs and stuff go red, and like blood, actual blood comes down the SOC monitor, and then the C-level see that, and they're like, ah, internet bad. And then what do you do then? There's not a damn thing you can do. Don't start here. And yet everybody's like, this sounds like a great idea. It's unintuitive, but do that stuff later. All right? Here's some things that you can do to start with. And these are going to sound really weird, so hear me out. I am not totally off my rocker, I'm just slightly. All right, so where to start? Look at your production database errors. What? All right, everybody who has a DBA that's worth a grain of salt is logging this in their production environment. Yet, I have yet to come in contact with a client that ingested that into their SIM. That's really weak sauce, guys. Production database errors are a beautiful log source, and the reason why is this. How often should you have a production database error? Never. Yes, whoever said that, full marks. At best, at the very best, that means that a dev like derped and they like finger mashed and some query got promoted to prod that shouldn't have, and there's an error causing some problem, like maybe a page doesn't load or whatever. That's fine. You should fix that. This is one of these things, this is one of those rare things where a security issue can help with an operational item. All too often in InfoSec, we are the group that says, no, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. Here's a case of where you can actually improve the operational efficiency of your organization and improve your security overall posture. Do it. But the more insidious reason that you need to watch for production database errors, any guesses? The data, they're going for the data, right? One of the things that, so I'm a hacker from way back in the day, and it used to be when I wanted to get into an organization, I'd have to like war dial my way in, or maybe like somehow like, you know, social engineer my way into their network and then find the database and connect into it. Now we got web applications, and it's like you got your own damn VPN directly to the data. Production database errors can be an indicator of SQL injection attacks. If you ever are in a production environment and you see somebody saying, hey, database, what version are you? Like, drop your butt and run to your incident response command center because people are attacking that environment. Should your devs know what version your database server is? I really hope. And they shouldn't be asking on the production instance. If you see people doing things like show me the table space, show me what the different database schemas are, you have an attack underway. Be on the lookout for this. It sounds weird that you would want to go for this as a log source, and yet it's a gold mine. Use it. Web proxy logs. Hey, client-side attacks are alive and well. They work really great. Wouldn't it be neat if we had a one-stop shop to show where all the users went to download the stuff, the drive-by downloads, or had been conned into clicking links? If only there was some sort of a log that would tell me where they've been on the internet. Oh wait, there is. I am really starting to lose faith in humanity when people say that they don't have the capacity or interest in their web proxy logs. That is an amazing resource. Your web application firewall. Now, what's a web application firewall do? It protects and blocks your web application from various attacks. Why are you not reading this? Now, maybe not on the external, you know, the open sewer that is the raw internet, but from the internal side of your network, if you see your web application firewalls lighting up at all, you need to get on that with a quickness. It's an amazing resource. Your false positive rate is going to be effectively nil, and it's going to tell you the system that's doing the attack. So it's an incredibly targeted system for helping you take your IR to the next level. Let's talk antivirus. All right. How effective is antivirus? Yeah, it's horrible. In fact, Symantec's executive vice president that oversees their endpoint protection product, told the Wall Street Journal about 2 years ago that their product is about 20% effective. You know what? I'll give him credit because he's at least being honest. A lot of the other folks are like, 20%, we're better than that. Oh, how effective are you? 21.2? And you're like, really? Way to go, Sparky. Here's the deal, though. Antivirus, I don't think of it anymore as an effective tool. I think of it as a canary in the coal mine. If I've got users that are somehow tripping the antivirus logs, I know who my problem children are on the network. One of the things you need to stop thinking about as log sources saying, hey, here's this thing, logs are actually telling you, hey, here's this interesting story that you need to go investigate. When somebody trips an antivirus log, the story really needs to be, hey, what you doing? Where are you going on the internet? What links you clicking? Because that shouldn't be tripping, and yet it does. And all too often, people are like, yeah, whatever, dude, I'm too cool to read the antivirus logs because they've showed that they successfully cleared it. No, the fact that it's tripping at all is an interesting thing. All right, now we saved my very favorite log source for the last. The second half of this presentation is all about having fun with DNS logs. Now, any questions so far? All right, cool. So now, for each and every log source that you get, what I want you guys to do is start skilling up, tooling up, and proceduring up so that you can do this for every type of thing that you get. This is your checklist. You want to be able to give the raw count, the top talkers, the bottom talkers. You want to be able to do time-based analysis. You want to be able to do stats 101 with mean, median, and mode. You want to be able to do percentiles and standard deviation. I'm going to spend the next couple slides going over each of these and why I think they're fun and interesting. We're going to start with raw count. It's a very base thing. I want to point out that there's no little amount of irony here on the trace and color. Trace the number 8, and yet how many cats are there? 9. Raw count isn't as easy as you might think. And I didn't doctor that picture, by the way. That's actually how that came. The bottom line here is sometimes the basics aren't so basic. One of the things that makes me very unsettled about a lot of the security tools that are out there now is they hide things like the raw count from you. They're like, don't worry, bro, the correlation engine's got it. You don't need to know how many event logs are coming in. You don't need to know how many file download requests happen from this host. Au contraire, just knowing the raw log in and of, or the raw count of various log sources is an incredibly useful stat. And it's a building block that we're going to use over and over again over these next couple slides. Top talkers. Yes, do it. Absolutely. These are the most noisy systems in your environment for whatever log source it is. Maybe it's the most SSH connections. Maybe it's the most email sent. I don't care. Whoever's talking the most over a particular service, protocol, or what have you, you need to look at them. Hopefully you have an explanation of why you're doing so much of this thing. Again, this is another thing where non-security issues get found. Dave Kennedy and I were this last November at a petrochemical. Huge organization, right? Like all petrochemicals are. There's like no mom and pop petrochemicals. Anyway, we were there, and when we were doing the scoping for it, we were on the call with the client, and we said, so, like, what security tools do you have? And they said, yes. And I was like, no. And they were like, no, we understood the question, and we got them all, bro. And I was like, okay, game on. Showed up to their office, and they had everything. They really did. But you know what? Hey, when you're like as rich as they are, you can, why not, have quite a few. But one of the things that was really wild is we were looking at some of the top talkers, And we discovered within like five or so minutes, Dave goes, he's like, hey, Mick, check this out. Like this one DNS server is querying like literally, and I mean, he had this graph and it was so absurd. It like spiked up and everything else was down here. He's like, that's literally like 1,000 times more than any other DNS server. I'm like, what the hell is going on with this thing? So we called our contact over and we're like, hey, like this, like, I don't know if it's a breach or something, but like it's kind of scary. Like maybe DNS exfil, maybe something's going on, don't know. They hop into the box and they had this really cool configuration differential tool that they had so that they're like running through and they're like, no, this is all the same, this is all the same, this is all the same. There was one single config change different with that one box that was 1,000 times more, and that change was, and believe it or not, this is a real setting that you can flip, it was set to not cache DNS request or response. Now, ponder the implications of that. If you are downstream of that DNS server and you're trying to do your stuff, how's life feel for you? It's pretty painful. It's a world of hurt. Well, this was a remote location, and they thought that all the user complaints about slow performance was due to a crappy ISP link. They went in, flipped that bit, tickets went way down. So understand that doing things like this with doing good homework on logs ain't always going to be about finding good and interesting, sexy attacks. Sometimes it's just about making things right in the organization. Now, we just got done talking about top talkers. Let's talk about bottom talkers. This one's a little more subtle. You still got to do this. I was involved in an incident response, and this was years back. Before I was with BDS. I was involved with an incident response where bad guys got in, we cleaned up the network, and we had like our yay party, and then they came back. And we were like, oh, well, clearly we didn't clean them out all the way. And we're having all this work on like how we're going to clean up the network and what we're going to do, clear stuff up. And this junior comes to me and like we work indoors, so we're pretty pale folks. But this junior was like even more paler than normal, and is like, "Hey Mick, I'm scared." And I was like, "What's going on?" And he goes, "Well, so I did this query, and take a look in the network flow thing, right?" And when you look at those network flow tools, you see like the chart just going like that. Well, his graph was like this, right? There was like nothing going on. And I'm like, oh, you know, your query's off. And he's like, no, I double checked it. I looked at the syntax. I'm like, yeah, that syntax looks right. And I'm like, but those boxes, those should be generating a little more traffic. So what that query was showing is over a month, the machines were, depending on the host, there was about, I think there were 5 of them if memory serves. And the traffic for each host was somewhere in the 5K to 25K per day, and they were on a domain. Okay, right, like just right there, like you're in weird land, right? But it gets worse than that. 3 of the 5 were file servers that were in active use. What the hell? So we were like, well, let's start seeing what's going on, because clearly the network flow analyzers are broke. They were working exactly as they were configured by the attackers after they had compromised the network administrator's workstation. They had reconfigured the network. By doing this bottom talker, we found cases that physically cannot exist, that can't be real. Now, I hope and pray you're never in that situation, because I got to tell you, that was a whirlwind of pain. Once we realized, I mean, it's bad when the bad guys are on your desktops. It's not fun. It's worse when they're on the servers. But Lordy, it is not a good time when they're on your network devices. So using things like bottom talkers can give you some real incredible views. Time analysis, love this stuff. And the thing that kills me is there's some snake oil salesmen out there that are like, oh, we've got advanced learning algorithms. We can look back in time. Well, really, all they're doing is they're saying for this time slice, how was it yesterday? How was it 2 days ago? How was it last week, last month, whatever? Do you need a compliance appliance 3000? Do you need the Hackatron 3800 in order to do this? No. You can do that with an Excel workbook. And I'll be the first to admit, ain't no shame in my game. I'm a Unix admin from way back, but from time to time I get lazy and I'll just start putting stuff like this into Excel and doing the math the easy way. This isn't hard. But if you're not doing this, you're missing an angle, a very valuable angle for understanding how things should be working in your network. It's not hard. Another one that is, these two go hand in glove. The biggest increase, biggest decrease. There's always a story associated with this. Find out what it is. Was there a patch that was installed badly? Was there, some configuration change that went sideways? I don't know. But these two are great ways of finding where things are going a little bit kinky in your environment. Time analysis is great. All right, let's talk a little bit about Stats 101, mean, median, and mode. And don't you dare yawn. This is not boring. This is interesting stuff here. Mean, median, and mode, when used appropriately, will save your bacon. Mean is the average. And that's where you simply add up all the things, divide by the number of things you got, and you got your average. It's going to be coming in handy. Next slide. I love median, though, a little bit more. Because what it's doing is it's telling you what the mathematical middle is of your data set. Things that drift a little too far one way or the other, plus or minus, from your mathematical middle can tell an interesting story. Mean and median together can be used as a quick cheat to tell what sort of statistical sample you got. You guys are all familiar with the bell curve? Well, if your mean and median line up pretty close together, chances are you got a fairly normal curve. If they start drifting apart from one another, you're looking at more of a ramp shape, or maybe a real squashed flat curve. And that's really important because you need to know what data set you're working with. If you don't understand the data set that you're working with, you're going to start applying some statistical formulas in the wrong way and getting some really weird and bizarre results. For my money, though, mode is where the hotness is at. Mode is the most common occurrence of a thing. In your infrastructure, hosts should look fairly similar. We're not trying to build special snowflakes in our environments, or most of you aren't. Same true with your log sources. Your logging events should be boring. Really, really boring. I mean, don't operate heavy machinery while looking at the logs. Boring. If you're doing mode analysis, you will find those special snowflakes in your environment and you can go stomp on them. Because you should. Because there's no chance that you're going to be able to manage your fleet if everybody's off doing their own thing. Mode analysis is perfectly lovely. Oh, this one. Standard deviations and percentiles. A lot of folks think, hey, great, stats to the rescue, woo! Well, hold up now. You've got to be a little careful with that. For starters, understand that standard stats models can scale very, very badly, especially as you get to larger institutions. I worked at a very large FI and a bank, and we had 300,000 associates. And this one external audit group came in and said, hey, we're going to audit the desktops. And I was like, all right, lovely, that sounds good. What were you thinking of doing? And they said, well, our statistical model says that we need to model 10%. And I'm like, ooh. You're going to model, and by the way, they had 1 week to do this. And I was just like, oh, this is going to be fun. And they were like, so, how many are we looking at? And I was like, 30. And they're like, sweet. And I'm like, K. And they go, oh, no. So understand you got to be cognizant of not only the sample size that you're dealing with, but also the bell shape of your curve, right? Stats folks, like, how many standard deviations out do you need to go to do outlier analysis typically? 3. Some folks say 2, some folks say 3. If you've got a huge sample set, that still might be a huge amount of outliers right here. If you're in that situation, don't have any shame in your game. Say, you know what, this is way too big to manage. We're going to go out 5. You know what? Why not? And then you're ending up with like these little bitty teeny outliers, and you can say, what? And you can do what I call the Dan McNear argument. He's a coworker of mine. And when you're totally off the rails and being a complete idiot, Dan will come up to you and he goes, seriously? Dude, seriously? And that's what you do to these particular ones. You clean up that mess and you walk your way in gently. Don't get caught in dogma of what your stats teacher taught you that you need to have a sample size of 10% or whatever. Figure out what's manageable, work with it. Now, this is a lot of work. I'm not trying to sugarcoat it, but it can get easier with a little bit of practice. Retool your environment. If you don't have the tools or techniques to do so, like build them. PowerShell, Python, Perl, Ruby, I don't care. There's ways to make statistical sampling tools for you that work for your environment, all at a cost of 0. And it's not fancy. It's not rocket science. Just practice. Train your people. After a little bit of time, folks are going to start getting a gut feeling for what looks normal in your environment. One of the things that I am constantly humbled by are how wicked sharp the SOC analysts are at where I work. And they will be, like, when I'm on call, which I am this week, from time to time, I'll get like a text with like all kinds of like emoji, like it's scary. And they're like, Mick, OMG, it's bad. And I'm like, what's bad? And they're like, this thing. And I'm like, what? And they're like, I don't know, man, it's just not right. And I'm like, well, like, walk me in there. And they can't even really articulate it because they've internalized this so much. Practice it. You'll get better. Now, again, this isn't easy per se, but it's doable. I get that you all have jobs. You're all busy. Carve aside a half hour every week, just 1/2 hour every week, to find a log source that needs this sort of love and start figuring out how you can model that and start working with it. Does that sound reasonable, doable? I hope. Any questions so far? All right. Now we're going to go into my perverse love of all things DNS. DNS is an amazing, amazing place to start. There's a lot of reasons for that. For starters, DNS servers are an amazing logger function. Every DNS server out there does a great job of logging. Period, the end. Just turn on the logging and just watch them roll in, start doing the analysis. Now, one of the things that is sad is I've started collecting people poo-pooing my feelings of love and infatuation for DNS. They're like, oh, who really cares? I don't care where my users go on the net. And when I heard that, I called up Dave Kennedy and I was like, hey, can I be on the trusted sex side for the next pen test, please? I've got better things to do, or this is hard. This was said by a Windows administrator that was running 2008 R2. It's 4 clicks. Now, I don't know what that Windows administrator has dealt with in their life, but maybe their threshold for hard is different than me, but this shouldn't be hard. It's not hard. In the interest of time, I'll skip this. All right, why I love DNS. It is the simplest log or event source you're ever going to consume. How many people have ever looked at DNS logs? Yeah? Would you say that they're super complicated and hard to read? They are? No, they're pretty dull. Oh, so, okay. I'm all hopped up on caffeine. You got no subtlety with me. I'm sorry, sir. Okay, hey, wait. So here's the thing. They're one of the simplest log event sources that you're ever going to deal with. And everybody's using DNS, or they should be. If people are surfing the internet or interacting with systems within your environment just based off of IP address, that's kind of weird. You might want to do a little investigation. What's even weirder to me are when I do incident response and I see that people aren't using their own internal DNS servers and they're using some third-party DNS server. Why? What the hell is going on here? Not necessarily an indicator of a breach, but it's something odd. Yeah.
Hopefully it's not a question, but to find out who is not using a DNS server, is that just because there not going to be any activity from them?
So the question, let me make sure I got the question right, is why might a user use a different DNS server?
How would you detect that?
Oh, how would you detect that? Yeah, so how you would detect if a user is using a third-party DNS server, there's two ways you can check that. One is at the firewall, you will see the requests originating from the host versus your internal DNS server. And then the other thing is if you did a configuration check on the hosts, you would see that they are configured to use a different DNS server. And oftentimes I see that people will do this to avoid detection. They want to play like Minecraft or whatever, and they know that people are looking at the DNS logs.
And basically, on what Mick had said, start with the first one. So start looking at your firewall traffic, looking at requests going out instead of going internal, and then you can take those, look at the config changes, or look at the configs on the host to kind of match them all up, because it might just be a configuration.
Yeah, it could just be or sometimes they just are troubleshooting something, or maybe your DNS servers were flaking out. And users were like, well, Google works like 8.8.8.8, go.
His first question was, how
Yeah.
would you detect that they're just using IP?
Oh, how would you, so your question was how you would detect if they're using IP?
Yeah,
Thank you.
I was
Yeah.
going to let you finish.
Yeah.
Would you just not see them in the logs?
Yes, that's what you would see. You would see them not in the logs, and then the other item is in most services, you will see the host that they're trying to interact with. So instead of having just the host name, it would have the IP address, depending on how your logging for that system is set up. But it's a weird thing to be looking for. Just be on the lookout for it. Another way that you can detect this is if you're doing bottom talkers for your DNS sources or DNS use. If you have a user that's abnormally low on DNS request, maybe they're doing something weird. Maybe they're not like networking as much as other hosts, but they might be doing some other shenanigans. Thanks for holding my feet to the fire. Feel free to keep the questions going. All right, so now I'm going to go through a couple use cases of why I love doing DNS, because there's a great deal of stuff that you can do out of it. Who's talking to who? With DNS records, you can see when a host makes a request to known malware domains. Now, you may say to yourself, we're blocking known malware domains with our web proxies. Mission accomplished. Is it? Would you still profit by knowing who's making requests to known malware domains? Why? Detection, right? Like, just the request in and of itself is a cry for help. You need to give them the help they deserve. Dynamic DNS providers. Okay, so the idea behind dynamic DNS providers is that you can have your own IP and just swap out the name on the flash real easy. Does it sound like something that, I don't know, a botnet control would really like? Yes, it is. Be on the look for people using DNS servers or dynamic DNS. What about countries you don't even do business with? I get that many of you guys are global corporations. That's neat. But, let's talk a second about Iran. There's still trade restrictions with Iran, and yet there's a lot of spam traffic that comes from there. You can kill that and stop it from even getting into your environment.
OFAC list.
The
OFAC?
Yes, what's the OFAC?
I can't remember exactly what it stands for, but it's a list of countries that the United States isn't allowed to do business with. It's primarily geared toward
Financials.
But yeah, I mean, you can get, so if the United States or any of its companies aren't allowed to do business with them, then you shouldn't have any communications with them in any way. So same thing as point 3 there, and you can easily check that.
Yep. Another similar easy check, and this is one that I've only encountered a couple times in my career, is the Alexa Top 1 Million. Amazon bought Alexa, which was an internet tracking company. Every 3 days, they publish a new list called the Top Million. These are the top, and it's a ranked list from 1 all the way to 1 million of the top most popular destinations on the internet. If you have users that are not on, they're going to sites that are not on the top million, you've got one of two things happening. One, you might have internet hipsters, and they're going to sites before they get cool, so you should be watching that anyway so you can get in on the ground floor for your indie cred. Or two, you have somebody who's going to a relatively new site that's a malware scary site. My advice to you is don't look for the top 1 million. Cut that list off at about, I don't know, 10,000, 25,000, whatever makes sense to you. Anything below that is weird. It's not necessarily bad or wrong. It's just something that you need to follow up on. It's free. Use this resource. Somewhat related to the Alexa Top Million are new domains. A domain that gets registered within 30 days is powerful weird. People don't go to new domains unless they're being phished or drive-by download malware. They just don't. New domains are suspect. Look to see how old the domain registration is. If it's less than 30 days, start thinking that it's suspect. What about your generated domain names? Malware, bots, and all those sorts of things are making computer-generated domains. They're not really human-readable, and it's just to evade normal detective controls. If you don't have the wherewithal, the technical capability to see these in your environment, two things. One, get that capability, and hit me up after the talk. I'll give you some tools and some suggestions. Right off the top of my head, like Bro is a great open source tool that will allow you to do this very easily. And if you don't have this capability, start doing incident response, because I guarantee you that you have an infection of some sort in your environment. Because if you can't see this, this is happening. I have an exact 1-to-1 ratio now of all the incident responses where I'm like, hey, they're going to QR43b.com, and they're like, oh yeah, good old QR34. You're like, what the heck? You know, seriously, no, that's a fake domain. I mean, it's a real domain, but it's not being used for legitimate use. This is one where I'm going to get really foamy in the mouth, and I apologize in advance. Be looking at the DNS records, please. The request and response is going to tell you whether or not there is data channel or command and control that's taking place over DNS. All right, I need to make this very clear to you because it's one of my favoriteest things to do when I'm allowed to be a pen tester. If I'm in an environment and your workstation network or your server network has no open ports whatsoever, I can't get any packets out, and you allow external name resolution, I'm going to get out. And what I'm going to do is make very specially crafted DNS requests that will be proxied over your good, normal DNS servers out to my evil DNS server that I control, and it will decode that query understand the command that was sent or the chunk of the file or whatever, and then send a response that's appropriate. If you're not looking at the DNS record, request and response, this is going to happen, and it's hiding in plain sight. It's not the fastest way to work, but it'll work. Also, I know a guy who hates to pay for the Wi-Fi on planes. Oh, weird audio problem. Sorry about that. So check this out. And here's what this should look like. If you start looking at this and you've never looked at this before, here's what you're looking for. You're looking for people that are going to a legit-looking domain where the host is totally bonkers, right? This is really, really, really strange. If you see this in your environment, find out the machines that are doing that talking and be on alert. Now, do not call out the cavalry just yet. There's a couple security products that actually use this as a way of getting updates for like updating the antivirus DAT file. So, yeah, Akamai uses it. There's a couple tools that use this as a way to basically do like heartbeat checks or license checks. But here's the thing though, right? That should be fairly minimal in your environment. You'll be able to whitelist this very quickly and easily. And if you're thinking, wow, this is really weird, how would I test my environment for these particular issues? Well, good news, we've got a tool for you called PowerCat. It's a tool that I wrote. That's the PowerCat logo, by the way. It's a implementation of Netcat rewritten in PowerShell. And one of the modes that it has, this was added by Luke Baggett. Luke, you the man. Thank you again for all your hard work. What it will do, he's on the internet, guys. Don't look for Luke like at the camera. I'm saying hi to the internet. So what Luke added to PowerCat was the capability to do Netcat relay or Netcat command and control or Netcat file transfer over DNS request. So it's a very quick and easy way to do these sorts of tests with what you've got in your environment. If you have any questions on how to set it up or have any problems with it, let me know. I'll be happy to help you get that going. Another tool that I love and use actually multiple times on any given week is a tool written by Dave Kennedy called GoatRider. What GoatRider does is you feed GoatRider a list of IP addresses or domain names that you think might be suspect. GoatRider will resolve them for the IP address or the host, either or, and then it will do many of these things that I talked about, like it will check the Alexa top 1 million for you. It will check some threat feeds for known bad malware. So you can do this analysis. It's not that hard. So, how many of you guys think DNS is still boring? Man, all that work from DNS. I'm on to you. So, all of that stuff from DNS. And that's just some research that we at BDS kind of cobbled together over the last, 6 months or so. And this is something we're going to continue to research and have fun with. But here's something that's weird. We've been using DNS for, since Al Gore invented the internet. And, right, like, we're here. Like, this isn't solved. And that makes me kind of, a little nervous. So, if you want to get in on the ground floor of something, this is a really cool place to start. It doesn't have to be DNS. There's other protocols. Lots of protocols. How many protocols are there? I don't know, like more than 5, and so I can't count that high. For my money, if you want to get into this, start looking at routing protocols. There is some really interesting attack stuff going on in the routing protocol space that should be stopped dead, and a lot of tools out there aren't doing as good or as clean of an analysis job as they should. One thing, say what you will about the, what was that lame lock or, sad lock that happened, bad lock that happened last week where people were like, oh no, SMB's totally broken. Yeah, okay, whatever. But one of the things that I liked about it was that it shined a spotlight on, hey, we need to take a look at the SMB protocol. If you don't think that the SMB protocol is a sick, sad little puppy of a protocol, man, like how long did it take Microsoft to clean up past the hash? Oh, wait, it's still there. I mean, they made it a little harder, so good job, guys. But it's, and I'm being serious, like good job, but it's still got a long way to go. So find a protocol that strikes your fancy, roll up the sleeves, start just playing around with it. Now, the next couple slides I'm going to show you is how far you can take this, using the concepts that I talked about prior to do some really cool stuff. And the reason I want to show this is, one, to kind of inspire you, get you fired up to do this sort of stuff, and two, I want you to realize that some of the things that people are selling as machine learning or like crazy this and that, it's a straight up scam. In a couple slides, I'm going to show you something that looks all gnarly and nasty, but it's just common stats. And here's how this is going to go. Again, I'm trying to do this so I'm playing the cards face up so that you can see what's going on. In 2 slides, you're going to be seeing a little bit of code that you can use as a query in Splunk against a HTTPS data flow. And it's going to look like crazy ninja magic, but it's not. All we're going to be doing is grouping events based off of criteria. And the criteria are going to be as follows. We've got a window of HTTPS flow data. Why do attackers like to use HTTPS, by the way? What? It's encrypted. You can't see it unless you do an SSL decryption or like intercept that, and there's some legal, like real big issues why you might not want to do that. So attackers will use HTTPS to do things like send beaconing, like malware for command and control, for instance. Metasploit. If you use the Meterpreter HTTPS reverse module, you can see these sorts of beaconing taking place in your environment if you do this analysis. And here's all this code does. It says, hey, do you have a single IP that's talking to another IP multiple times within that time slice? Now, this time slice is just 1 hour, okay? So is that hard to do? Do we have an IP that talks multiple times within 1 hour to the same IP? Is that hard to do? No. No, this is very easy. Okay, so can we count how many times they talked? Yes. Yes, we can. This is a very easy thing to fix. Now, this is the part where we up the difficulty just a teeny tiny, just a little bit, but it's still not hard. What we're going to do is, for each time they talked, what was the average time difference between those talks? Okay? That's all we're doing. Okay, do you guys all agree that this is a very doable thing programmatically? Yes? Yes? Okay. Hold on to your butts because the code is ugly. There it is. I warned you, it's pretty nasty. What we're doing is, like I said, we're saying, hey, grab these items where the next time is not equal to null, so that it's happened more than once, and find out what the gap is between those events, and then give us an average of those gaps. Right? Nothing really fancy. It looks a little weird, but at the end, when you're done with this, you're going to get a report that looks like this. It will say, and these source IPs are redacted for obvious reasons, okay? And what you can see here is, in this hour, this particular host contacted an external entity 11 times, and the average gap was 5 minutes, or 300 seconds. And the variance between that gap was 0.000487. So is that a human or a script? It's a human. It was a trick question. They were really highly caffeinated. No, that was a script, right? But now, here's the thing that's interesting about this particular analysis. Bad guys are getting wiser to the fact that we're doing this sort of analysis looking for beacon counts. The reason that we added this variable gap is if the bad guys are trying to be a little tricky, they may put what's called jitter in, where they'll say, do plus or minus a couple seconds each time. Now, we didn't see that in this particular event, but we kind of did sort of here on this one, where it was 0.7 seconds difference. That's kind of, I mean, it's still, you know, but you can see that these aren't happening all at the exact same piece. This is an amazing resource. It's nothing magic, nothing hard. All we have to do is start looking for it. As an industry, we got to start talking about this sort of stuff. We have lost our way when it comes to logging. I will be the first to admit that I had grown fat, dumb, and lazy. I was used to using the log system and just having it do all the stuff for me. You know your environment better than the engineers that made this tool. So start doing this analysis. Log like you mean it. Find out what you don't know in your environment. Find out that ignorance and kill it. Kill it dead. Do so aggressively. When you do, and it works, share with the community. And don't say like, oh, we found this malware in our environment. No, that's not what I'm after. We want the queries. Like, hey, we had this data source. Here's this trick we did. It worked out great. Share, because I'm sure there's other people that would be able to jam with you on this. So thank you so much for your time. If you got any questions, I'll be hanging out here.